Hi, welcome to another video in my playlist about backpacking. And so in my last video, I talked about food in general for your trip. But in this video, I want to talk about dehydrating your own food. And so I plan to talk about my experience with dehydration of food, what I find are some of the advantages and disadvantages, and then a bunch of tips, things that I've learned along the way, as I prepare each trip. And then in the following videos, I will actually show some of the food that I prepared using the dehydrator for the trip that I just came back from. I guess first, I would mention that as a kid, I actually had a lot of dehydrated food. My parents, they had their own dehydrator. My dad had made one like out of plywood, and it was stained and everything, and it was like a big cabinet, bigger than any dehydrator I've ever seen before, and it had legs and like a cabinet door, and inside were shelves, but they were made out of the screen, like from a sliding door kind of screen, and it had a wooden frame, and so my parents could slide in and out these trays, and they put fruit and fruit leather. I had a lot of like sort of fruit roll-ups, homemade fruit roll-ups as a kid. And the heater inside was actually an old car heater. And so he had made this dehydrator, and we had it for as long as I can remember. But yeah, as a kid, I had lots of dehydrated food. So that was sort of always in the back of my mind. And then skip forward to 2008, and I was on a canoe camping trip with my father-in-law. My wife wasn't there. She had sort of double booked herself and she had to go to a conference. It was me and my father-in-law and then a whole bunch of her friends. But there was this one couple, Travis and June, they organized the trip. And they had this huge bag of mango, and they said they dehydrated it themselves. And it was really good. Like me and some of the other people, we like really pigged out on it. It was so good, this mango. And then I noticed also that he was taking pictures of his food because he said that actually they made their own camping food. And so I've been camping many times up to then, but I never really made my own food like that. And so not too long after that, I saw a food dehydrator. I was on a trip, and it was in BC actually. And so I bought this dehydrator. When I bought this one, I seem to remember I did buy extra trays. So this one has just the top with a dial, just a simple dial, and air comes in through the sides, and there's a heater in here, and it just comes out the bottom and goes into the trays. There's no on or off switch. It's just a simple plug it in, turn it on, unplug it, it's off. Okay. And then there's a bunch of trays, and so they're flexible, which helps to kind of loosen the food. Once it's dry, it might be a little stuck. It usually is a little stuck. So you can kind of gently, flex the tray. And it came with one of these solid trays, so that fits in here. Okay, so for things that are very liquid, you would need one of these, okay? If it's just fruit, you can cut it into pieces and put it on there. So like I said, it only came with one. And so a few years ago, I tried to look for more online, and I was able to find something very similar, but it's much smaller. So it doesn't take advantage of the full space, but yeah, it allows me to, I got two of them. So it allows me to do like a lot more a lot of liquid things than just the one tray. Up to then, what I did use though was parchment paper. So you could do that. Let me show you that. So this is just parchment paper. So parchment paper is better if something's hot than wax paper. And it's just on a roll. So I might pull out that much and put a strip in here and then just spread the food on it without going over the edge. Sorry. Or I might actually put a whole square and then with scissors, cut a hole in the middle. So then it would fit more of the tray, but there would be a hole to allow the air to go between levels. Okay. And then lastly, there's just a bottom, and there's like vent holes in it. Okay. So when the trays have food on them and they're stacked up, more or less the air can't get through except through the bottom. So it has to go through the whole stack of trays before, absorbing moisture before it can exit out of the dehydrator. When my kids were little, I would dry fruit for them. I guess kind of like my dad, actually, for us. But I would say I probably dehydrated banana like literally every 3 days for like 3 years, like nonstop. So I used it a lot with my kids and making food. And then, I've made things like beef jerky, salmon jerky. Those were good. But then I also started getting into dehydrating food for camping. This dehydrator obviously is a device specifically for dehydration, but I see that toaster ovens and air fryers, they seem to have a dehydrator setting on them. So I haven't tried those, but presumably you could use those for the same thing. So yeah, there's lots of ways you can sort of dehydrate your own food. So I guess if I talk about advantages, so for backpacking, it's quite important that things are lighter. So when you remove the water, it's much lighter. It's more compact because you only have so much space in your bag. It won't spoil. So if you're going on a 1-week trip, okay, the food will last for the whole week. It won't be going rotten or moldy. It's quicker. So if generally speaking, it takes maybe like you have to boil water and then maybe it takes like 10 minutes. So that sometimes that's important, if you don't have a lot of sunlight left, or, the bugs are out or whatever, you want to cook and eat quickly and get back into your tent. So having dehydrated food kind of speeds up the food preparation on trail. The disadvantage is that then it's more work, right? You have to sort of, get the ingredients, put it together, maybe cook the food at home, and then you have to dehydrate it. And usually when I put food in my, in the dehydrator, I let it run overnight, and then you have to portion it and package it. Okay, so I actually do kind of enjoy those things, but yeah, I mean, it takes more time. Maybe it takes 2 or 3 weeks before I actually go on my trip. I'm like cooking and dehydrating and running the dehydrator every night and different meals and that. So for some people, yeah, that's, they don't want to spend that much time. They'd rather just go, or they don't have the time. They'd rather just go buy their food, camping food at the store. Okay. So yeah, those are some advantages and disadvantages. So some tips about dehydrating your own food. I guess if you didn't like cooking, you could always ask someone to cook you food, and then you would use your dehydrator and dehydrate it. Well, that would be nice. But another option would be to go online and, or there are books even, and look at recipes, and they have the ingredients and they have portions and instructions to do on trail. So you could do that. It's probably a good place to start if you're just getting started, to kind of learn how things work. But there are a lot of recipes that you could just adapt to dehydration and then eating on the trail. And so some of my favorite recipes, yeah, I've kind of figured out maybe how I could sort of fudge it, dehydrate it, and have it on trail. Things that have like tomatoey bases, tomato sauces. So this is diced tomatoes. This has a lot of water in it, so you would have to dehydrate a lot of water out of that. But those things tend to dehydrate well. Tomato sauce, it's often, if it's just sauce, it often dries like flat and sticky. But that's fine. If it's sticky, I just have it in a bag. But those work well. Things like, well, this is instant rice. And of course, it came in this big box. It was blue, but I've been kind of working away at it for several years. Actually, this rice in here I've had it for a couple of years now. So the box was getting big, so for how much is in there. So I just cut the instructions out, stuck it in a bag. But this is instant rice, and so it cooks very quickly. Okay. If you want some sort of pasta, then I suggest you cook it on the stove at home for, whatever the normal amount of time or however much you want, and then drain that and then dehydrate the cooked pasta, and it will prepare very quickly on trail. Okay. Things that require milk, so I use powdered milk. If you can only find skim milk, that's fine, but I try to get the whole milk. Talked about this in my last video. Or this is powdered coconut milk for like curries and that. So if I require half a cup of milk, I'll look up how much powder I need, and then I add that to my camping food at home, so that when I make the food, it's kind of sort of has that amount of milk in it. Okay, just kind of judge how much water you need to put in that. For making food at home, I suggest getting a scale. And so this one measures in grams, and that's kind of helpful. You can see it goes just over 1 kilogram. I can set it, I can adjust the zero there. I don't think it even has to be an accurate scale, even just like a cheap one, but as long as you're consistent with what you use, I think that's probably okay. And because I'm making my own, and when you dehydrate food, it's more compact. So to help me judge how much is one serving, what I often do is for something like chili, which I kind of eat on a regular basis, I tend to always eat out of the same kind of bowls, right? This is from IKEA, and I use these bowls like every day when I'm eating. And so I know when I serve myself, maybe I might use 2 ladlefuls of food, and I can see how much that is, and that's how much I would normally eat in a meal. So I actually kind of can use this as a portion, because I know sort of how many ladles of chili I would eat. But what I would do is I would actually either weigh the bowl itself empty, or put it on and zero it, and then put in my food like chili, how much I would normally eat, and then now weigh that. So it's the cooked chili, right off the pot on the stove. And so then I would know how much that weighs. Okay. And either I could subtract the weight of the bowl, or I would zero it. And then whatever I'm measuring is really just the weight of the food. And then, assuming it's not super hot off the stove, I would put it on my solid tray. Of course, it wouldn't be on this scale, but it would be in the dehydrator. But I would use a spatula, and I would get all of it in there and spread it out as much as possible, and put that in the dehydrator and let that dehydrate overnight. Usually after a couple hours, because it's wet, it spreads out all over, and so what's touching the tray itself isn't really exposed to the warm air. So after a couple hours, I might come over and break it up and mix it up a little bit, so that way the part that was touching the tray is now exposed to air. It'll dry faster that way. And then, let that dry overnight. And then the next day, I know that what's on this tray is 1 portion. And so I could put that back into my bowl, just being careful. It's all crumbly now. Put it back in, try to get it all in, off the tray into the bowl. And now I could measure my bowl again of food. This is the dehydrated food. And so now I know how much the food itself weighed before and after dehydration, and presumably that difference is how much water was lost. And 1 gram of water is equal to 1 milliliter of volume of water. Okay? So let's say the bowl was 100 grams, and I measured it, and it was 350 grams. So 250 of that would be the food, and then I dehydrated it, and now let's say it's 300 grams, for example. So I know that 50 grams was lost from dehydration, so that was 50 grams of water. And so then I would know how much water to add, more or less, on trail when I'm cooking. So logically that should work, but what I have found is that when I go to rehydrate things on trail, it doesn't quite work that way. It usually is kind of soupy still. So what I suggest is maybe 2/3 of what you calculate for how much water was lost and use that on trail. So what I do then is I know how much is one serving, and I put that into a bag. I would either on the printer or just on a piece of paper write down what the food is, maybe how many servings, because this says 2 servings. So this is presumably 2 servings of food in here. So that would probably be 2 bowls of this for me. Okay, and how much water I think, and then, like I said, maybe 2/3 of how much was lost during dehydration. How much boiling water to put in, and then there's other instructions here: stir, wait 10 minutes. Okay, it says optional 1 tablespoon of Parmesan and 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So I could add those too. I wouldn't put those in during the dehydration process. I would add them on trail, but they're optional. So if I can't be bothered to bring those things, Parmesan cheese, olive oil, then I'll just skip it. But yeah, so if I know how much water to put in, then typically what I do is I boil the right amount of water. I add my dried food, stir it up, and put the lid on. And because it's already cooked before dehydration, it generally takes about 10 minutes. And that will reabsorb the water. And the texture will be very similar to what you would get if you had, for example, chili right off the stove. It's actually like quite similar. If you like your food hot, you could make one of these. So this is just a cozy for my pot. And this I made from a windshield screen. So this I bought at the dollar store. You put this in your car when you parked, and to kind of block out the sun. So I bought this from the dollar store, and you can see that I've cut a strip off there, a couple strips off the bottom. You can see where I've placed the pot. It measured maybe 1/2 centimeter wider than the diameter of the pot, and then cut those out into a circle and a strip, and I use duct tape here. So this is black duct tape to hold that together, and so that adds some insulation and keeps the food warm while I'm waiting for those 10 minutes for the water to reabsorb. So I boiled my water, put in my dried food, stirred it. Okay, the pot would be hot really at that point. So I set it into the cozy, and I can tuck it inside, but often I can't be bothered. And then just put the lid on. And so that would sit for 10 minutes. And then I would take the lid off, stir it, and you could eat it right like that. Okay? And like I said, it's usually very much like eating it off the stove right at home. Okay? So that helps with portioning and knowing how much water to add. If you use one tray, if you use scale, you measure. And again, 1 gram of water is about 1 milliliter. Okay, 50 grams of water is 50 milliliters. But usually you only use like 2/3, or start there, and then each time you go, you kind of know, like, oh, that was a little dry, or that was too soupy, and so then you adjust over time until you get it just right. Okay. So one thing to note is that oils, fats, they won't dehydrate. Okay, so if there's a lot of oil in your food, obviously that weight will still be in your dehydrated food. Maybe that's not such a big deal for you. One thing though is if you're handling the food, obviously, your hands will get greasy, and sometimes it's kind of hard to be as clean on the trail than it is at home. So it might be a little greasy. The other thing that people caution about is that those oils can go rancid. Okay, so just like any oil, butter, that kind of thing, it can go rancid. So if you're dehydrating to store your food long term, that would be a concern. Okay, so then you would want to reduce the oils. For me, usually I'm cooking things, over the prior 2 weeks for me camping. So I don't think that the food would ever go rancid because I'm eating it, within a few weeks, a week or two. But yeah, you'll often see that. So just be aware of that. Like I pointed out, sometimes you can add oils after you've you've rehydrated your food on trail. Okay, so that's all I really wanted to say about dehydrating your food for backpacking. It's not hard to do; it just takes more time, but there are a lot of advantages, right? It's lighter and more compact. Okay, it will last the duration of your trip. It'll be cheaper than buying your own camping food, you know, the prepackaged camping food, and it may very well be healthier too. But if you're like me and you kind of enjoy like planning out your food and portioning it and measuring and like experimenting with different recipes, then yeah, like dehydrating is part of the camping experience, I think. So I hope you found this video interesting, and in the next few videos, actually, will post some of the things that I made for my trip. So stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching this one.